Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Lantern's Quest and our series Exploring the Sketchbook of Christ. Glad you are with us, watching us either live or later off the video. I'm glad you're a part. If you're new to these episodes, I'd encourage you to go to the Bradford Christian College YouTube channel, click on playlists, and you'll find the Exploring the Sketchbook of Christ playlist, and you can see all the episodes. We're actually on episode 51 of this series. So we've been exploring that sketchbook for quite some time. It's the Gospel of Mark that we're working through, and we'll be in Mark chapter 12. But hopefully, we'll be finishing Mark chapter 12 in tonight's episode. But before we get to that, let me ask that right now you go ahead and like and subscribe. Then you don't have to remember to do it later. So like the video, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, and get ready to leave a comment. All of those things are helpful in supporting videos that we do. So we would appreciate that. All right. Let me introduce our regular guests. First, Pastor Lucas Baumbach, who hasn't been with us for a couple of episodes, but we're glad to have him back. Pastor Lucas Baumbach with Reformation Bible Presbyterian Church. And Pastor Lucas, anything you want to update us on? And I know that one thing you've been doing on a pretty regular basis is posting some shorter videos on YouTube, most of them walking around videos. So there's some pretty fun scenery to watch in the background as you talk about various topics. So what would you like to update us on?
Yeah, it's kind of like becoming a bit of a pastor's travelogue, right? So as I walk and talk about theological stuff, you get to see different parts of Idaho or wherever I'm at the time. So I was in New Plymouth, where David usually is recently, and it's a town with a really interesting city planning layout and history, and so get a little travel Idaho in the pastor's walk and talk. So
Right.
tune in.
And we got a peek at your library a couple episodes ago, I think. Got to see a few of the books that are on the bookshelf back there.
Yeah, I, frankly, that's one of the things that interests me is I want to see what's behind the people whenever they're doing like stuff in their office, and you can see they've got books, and I want to see what's up there. So you don't always get to see that. So that's what I did. Last week I posted a little walk through some of my books. There's an interesting cross section of books here. David, where are your books? I thought you usually have a library.
Well, I'm not at my usual location. That's why the background is what it is, and possibly my audio isn't as good as it's been in the past. I'm in a limited situation just on a laptop, and so we're going to see how this goes.
Are you at Camp David? Is it?
I was wondering if maybe it's in the cage of Adullam there. It's a little bit painful.
I'm at our Camp David rather than our home. So some unexpected occurrences caused us to change location for the moment that didn't give me time to put together what I needed to for the podcast. So I'm just happy I'm able to be here doing the podcast.
Okay, so Reformation Bible Presbyterian Church, there's a link in the description below to visit their website, and you can find them on YouTube, and their Pastor Lucas preaching each Sunday. And so I encourage you to check that out. Now, David, you're a pastor, teaching elder. I'm not sure what you call yourself there at Wellsprings Church, but anything you want to update us on with that?
Well, on my card, it says teaching elder. But it's not unusual to be called pastor. That's what people are used to. And I do function in that capacity, fulfilling the pastoral duties at Wellsprings Church. And we're progressing through. We're in the last psalm of book 3 of the Psalms. I think I've got a couple more teachings on that. And then we'll be going to the gospel, the next gospel to cover, and that'll be Luke. So looking forward to doing that. But a lot of my time is focusing on preparation for the fall of Bradford Christian College. We've got that coming up, and so we're excited about that. And so again, we often put out there, if you know of somebody interested in a good biblically founded college and biblical principles and the Reformed faith, encourage you to look at Bradford Christian College or direct them there and see if it might fit their needs.
And again, links for Wellsprings Church and Bradford Christian College are in the description below. And Wellsprings Church on YouTube as well, so you can see sermons there and become more familiar with Wellsprings Church. And I just mentioned with Bradford Christian College, bradfordchristiancollege.com, the website to go to, a number of different bachelor degrees. David, I remember once we both talked about the bachelor's in Christian counseling, and
Right.
that's not just something that is for somebody who's looking to go into counseling, but it could be valuable for elders at a church or deacons, anybody.
Definitely. Anybody in the church. If you know the writings of Jay Adams at all on what he termed nouthetic counseling, which is often now talked about as biblical counseling, whereas he believed counseling from those in offices of the church should happen and be under the church. He often addresses the fact that the Gospels and the epistles especially call us to participate in the lives of one another that in many ways would mimic counseling situations as we exhort, encourage, and edify one another. So it is a skill, and it is a knowledge base of biblical ideas and application that all Christians can benefit from.
Right. And and as best as we can, being as prepared as we can be to really be a help to fellow believers that are struggling with whatever, and having something substantive that we can give to someone who's struggling. I think that makes that particular program.
Excuse me, and even for our own lives, I mean, what you are learning is what the Bible says about life and how to approach life, the principles by which we're guided, plus very specific areas of life are addressed in individual issues and relationship and family and marriage type issues as well. So it's very beneficial, I think, just for your own personal edification.
Right, and that's just one degree program. We've also got. Go ahead.
My 2 cents in here. For those who are wondering, this may not be certified biblical counseling coursework but it is the same material that is used in certified biblical counseling. So you're not, from what I understand, is that correct? Like, from my understanding,
you're going. Go ahead, Tim.
A lot of the same books.
Right. Actually, completion of our bachelor degree program will satisfy the requirements for the first level of certification with I forget the name of the organization, but biblical counseling.
The Institute of Nouthetic Counseling.
Yeah. So you'll actually satisfy the requirements for that first level certificate that they have for counseling. Yeah.
Right.
But along with that, we also have a program in theological studies and Christian education, whether elementary or secondary level, Christian leadership, which is pretty interesting program as well, especially for someone who's thinking that they might want to be involved in sometimes called parachurch, but it's kind of a nonprofit or ministry organization for various purposes, and they want to have some skills in leadership in that regard. So I think that's pretty valuable. And then the Master of Theology, it actually includes a Greek language course and a Hebrew language course in it as well. And I point those out just to emphasize that Bradford Christian College endeavors to be academically rigorous, not just an easy way to get some, rubber stamp degree or something. There's academic rigor to what is being done there as well.
Right. And even in the various areas of study, whether it be the systematic theology, hermeneutics, biblical theology, Puritan theology, whatever. The content is, as you're saying, is a very high quality. You're going to be studying some of the really classic and masterful theologians of Reformed history as you go through the course.
Okay, so sorry, but maybe we took too long talking about Bradford Christian College. But anyway, there you can see the information about Bradford Christian College on the website, bradfordchristiancollege.com. All right, let's get to the substance of our time together. Let's see, I need to get that out of the way and get that in the way. All right, so we're in Mark chapter 12. It's still Tuesday. In the last week of Christ's time on earth, Tuesday during the day, and we've been in the day of Tuesday for quite some time. Now, last couple of episodes, some of the verses we looked at were verses 35 through 37, where we've had, up to this point, we've had questions being fired at Jesus, and now at verse 35, Jesus kind of turns the table and asks a question of them. And then verses 38 through 40, we talked about this last episode. Mark briefly addresses, I say briefly because Matthew has a much more extensive treatment of this episode, but Mark briefly mentions here Jesus teaching about beware. I can say the word, just give me a moment. Beware of the scribes. And so, Lucas, you haven't been with us, so I thought we'd start with you. If you'd like to maybe just some brief comments about these two passages here, if you have anything.
When we came into chapter 12, I said that Jesus was going to go through a series of encounters, and he was going to hit all the main groups that needed to be confronted, right? Confronted with their shortcomings, confronted with their sins. Of course, nobody wants to think that they're wrong. And certainly the Pharisees didn't want to think that they're wrong. Here, the scribes in 38 through 40 don't want to think that they're wrong. And Jesus has such a poignant way, a winsome way. Actually, I don't know how winsome he is. He just really tells it like it is. Winsome is like a sort of, you phrase things in a way that's going to win people over. I think he kind of just tells the truth, right? That he ends in verse 40, he says, they will receive greater condemnation. So these people aren't really won over by Jesus's message. He just sort of tells it like it is. Eventually maybe they are won over because I believe a lot of these folks come to faith in Acts. But prior to the crucifixion of Jesus for basically trumped up charges, but really for the sins of the world, right? For our sin. It was God's plan for it to happen for our sin. They thought they were executing Jesus for their own purposes, but turned out to be for God's purposes. So kind of like what it says in Genesis 50:20, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. It's like the ultimate gospel reversal, right? So these folks all have to kind of be confronted before Jesus can really finish up his ministry here on earth. That he's come to bring the kingdom. The kingdom is here. The kingdom is at hand now. The kingdom is at hand, not someday, but now the kingdom is at hand, and he is ushering in the kingdom. He's confronting the rulers of the day and their sin and their inability to see kind of beyond their own point of view.
Okay.
That's kind of how I would sum up this. We've been on for weeks now, but it's all significant, this confrontation phase.
Right. Okay, so we are coming to the last 4 verses of Mark 12 here, but I'm going to start at verse 38 and read through verse 44. And there's a particular reason I'm going to do that. I'm not necessarily going to say why I'm doing that. We'll just see how things go. But I'm going to start at verse 38 here and read to the end, and then we can really focus on this section 41 through 44. And in his teaching, he, that is Jesus, said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and light greetings in the marketplaces, and have the best seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at feasts, who devour widows' houses and for a pretense make long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." And he, that is Jesus, sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people putting money into the offering box. Many rich people put in large sums, and a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which make a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, "Truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. For they all contributed out of their abundance. But she out of her poverty has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." Okay, so David, we're focusing on verses 41 through 44. It may be a story that many people are familiar with. They may have some idea of the widow's mite, as sometimes it's referred to. And I think there's a typical way that this story is presented. In fact, in the kind of commentary that I use to kind of form the outline for what we're doing, it titles this section as "Commendation of the Widow's Offering." And I think that is perhaps the most common way that this passage is treated, as a commendation of the widow's offering. So I'll just say that, and David, you can.
I get to go from there. Well, I'll preface my remarks with this, just to add to the background of coming to this point, is Mark 12, 38 through 40, which we have covered, and I'm not going to say a whole lot about it, but is expanded in, or is presented in its expanded view in Matthew 23 with all the "woe unto you Pharisees and scribes, you hypocrites," that thing. That was Jesus' last public address. Can you imagine that? The last public address he gave was his denouncing of the scribes and Pharisees, and just really lambasting them, which included these things that you read here. And so that has gone on, and his crowd, his audience, has been winnowing down. It was the crowds and the disciples and the Pharisees and Sadducees coming in. They had been silenced and now have left. And in Matthew 23, it says that he addressed the multitude and the disciples, and now it's coming down to the disciples, which we'll find out here in a moment. And it says that he sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people putting money into the offering box. He's actually progressed from probably the court of the Gentiles, the greater court where he had the masses and was teaching and so forth, and he's now entered what's called the court of the women. And that doesn't mean only women are in there, but it designated all the further women could go as far as approaching the more central areas of the temple. And so that's why it carried that name. But in that area, there was a number of offering boxes that were kind of, as I understand, shaped like horns or trumpets that people could come and contribute for the temple and the work of the temple and so forth. That in other places, Jesus would say that the scribes and Pharisees, they blow trumpets and call attention to themselves as they make these contributions. And so, that's just kind of the setting. He's moved into another region of the temple, and he's placed himself in a place where you could easily observe the contributions that are being made. And what Mark and Matt what Mark points out here, I guess I should leave it there, is a contrast of the many rich people that put large sums into these offering boxes, and then a particular poor widow that has come and put in just 2 small copper coins. And just for people's reference, the whole saying, well, let me throw my 2 cents worth in, that comes from this. So many of our sayings in English come from things out of the Bible, and that's what this is. And were you wanting me to go through with a position on this, or contrasting positions on this? Is that what you'd like?
I want you to express your understanding, or whatever you want to.
Typically, people that preach from this, and what Jesus said to his disciples, truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. And what it goes on, preach it in terms of God blesses sacrificial giving. Okay. And, missionaries coming to raise funds for their mission work, or some other Christian work, or just a sermon on giving, will often use this and point out how Jesus identified this poor widow who gave to her greatest hurt, even. For she basically gave everything she had left. And they preach it in those terms, but that, I think, is missing the point. If you stay in the context of what's written here, Jesus has condemned the scribes and Pharisees for devouring widows' houses, that we just read in verse 40. And, being in positions of persuasive authority as the religious leaders and representatives of God to the people, if you read Matthew 23, you can see how Jesus saw them and how destructive they were, including the devouring of widows' houses, which is so contrary to the scriptures that say to care for the widow, and from Old Testament law to James in the New Testament of what pure religion is to care for the widow. And yet this woman comes and is depicting the example of the results, I view it this way, of their persuasion that if you just give all that you got, then God will, take care of you. And I think that that's contrary to what's really being taught there. Nowhere does Jesus actually commend what is being done. He just points out the fact that this happened. Those that had abundance, they gave large sums if they could afford that. She gave her last 2 cents, I guess you would say. And so it's not giving that Jesus is really teaching on here. He is providing an actual witness or testimony to what he has denounced the scribes for, devouring of the widow's houses. So there's 2 different views on this, and they're very contrary to each other. I go with the latter that I was just presenting.
All right, Lucas, your thoughts on these verses? You'll need to unmute yourself, by the way, Lucas.
All right, I'm just trying not to let my heavy breathing over here get distracting. No, I'm not really any problem with the discussion so far. Just and some of the stuff I'll say is probably repetitive, but there's certainly a contrast between the humility of the lady who comes and she gives 2 coins, which is not going to take a lot of time. In fact, it says that Jesus was beholding. He was beholding, he was watching, he was paying attention to the crowd. And he sees, of course, the rich people putting in large sums, which the way it's described is that these collection baskets actually are shaped like shofar, but in reverse. So there's like a small opening to put the money in, and then it goes down into a big basket. Anyways, like a trumpet, but pointing downwards. There's maybe a play on words, like some people come to trumpet their giving, right, and make long prayers as they drop in like a coin at a time, because apparently you couldn't just dump all your coins in a big pot. You had to like insert your coins maybe slowly. So there would be a ostentatiousness about just the time it would take a rich man to do it. You would tend to notice the guy who was there for like a minute or two dumping coins in, slowly, and praying, maybe ostentatiously they did it, as opposed to this poor woman who it didn't take her any time. She just came, dropped her coins, and walked away. And Jesus is just reflecting on this whole scene in front of him, and maybe even some of this theology of the lesser at the last day, or in the kingdom of heaven, will be greater, and the greater in the kingdom of heaven will be lesser. So there's a bit of a reversal of stations in the scriptures. The last will be first, the first will be last. And this comes at the very end of this whole cycle of dealing with all these sort of high and mighty groups of people, right? And he says, of course, as you've pointed out in verse 40, that these people who are important, who want the best seats in the synagogue, they're the ones, actually, they're damaging poor people like her. But it's actually, and this is kind of a bit of a beatitude, maybe, that Jesus is saying this woman's poor, like poor in spirit, and it's the, blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted. The kingdom of heaven is like these children, these little ones. It's always the lesser, the less privileged, the more humble, the less prideful, maybe, who are elevated in Jesus's estimation. And what does God desire? To do justly, to walk, to love mercy, and walk humbly, right? So, and you could interpret that to do justly in this life is to mercifully walk and humbly walk before God, expecting that the God of mercy will, and humility. Jesus came in humility to the earth to bless us ultimately with glorification, because we'll be lifted out of our sin. But he came into a sinful world, in a fleshly world, and bore sin in his flesh, right? And there's such a dramatic, overturning of our station in life. So I think that it would be dramatic. It's almost as dramatic. I mean, I think it's similar. People say the scene where Christ forgives the woman caught in adultery, right? She's supposed to be stoned in John chapter 7, and but they all go away because they recognize they're all sinners, right? Even the high and mighty men who are supposed to be judging her go away. They don't cast the first stone, and people say that doesn't belong in the Bible. That's apocryphal. That's been added later. And I don't think so. It makes a lot of sense in this similar context that these are lowly sinners who are ready to admit they're sinners. And The rest of the problem is with the rest of these high and mighty people who are too prideful to admit their sin. So, which are you? Those who are humble enough to admit your sin, or those who are too high and mighty to do it? And this woman, we don't know that she didn't have a bag of money back home and she just brought 2 coins. But, Jesus tells us that his interpretation is she didn't have a lot. That's why she only gave 2 little bits, and but she's still giving. In fact, there's been times in my life where I may not have given at church because I figured, well, I was unemployed, I didn't have much to give. And this woman was poor, but she's still giving, which is just a remarkable act of faith. When you don't have anything to give, but you keep giving, it's remarkable.
Right. So for a long time, I accepted that, okay, so she's the example of giving. But eventually it started to bother me that, assuming that Jesus is not employing hyperbole here, and he's just being truthful, that she gave all she had to live on. Now, a while back, I had the privilege of serving as an administrator of a church here. And in that position, I was blessed with the oversight of their benevolence fund. And so I had the opportunity to interact with people who were in difficult circumstances, sometimes of their own doing, admittedly. Other times, the poor mother with young children whose husband was suddenly stricken with serious cancer and passed away, and she's abandoned, in that sense. And so the thing that struck me at that point, and I was teaching a Sunday school class, and we were going through the book of Mark, and we came to this section, and the thing that struck me is that as the church, if we saw a poor widow in our midst, and we were aware that what she just placed in the offering plate was everything she had to live on, wouldn't it be right for the church to look at her and say, no, you shouldn't be putting anything in, ma'am. You should be taking out what you need, right? I mean, that would be the ministry of the church to her, the poor widow. But this poor widow doesn't have the opportunity for that blessing because she's in the midst of a church, if you will, that is busy about devouring widows' houses. And she's left unministered to in this circumstance. And I think that is a striking lesson that comes through in this moment. And fine, if this is, and I wouldn't disagree that if this was a reflection of the faith that this poor widow has, but when I teach this in a Sunday school class and I point this out, and I have somebody in that class say, "Oh no, this is just a lesson that we should all give sacrificially," and I say, "Are you telling me that if you watched someone that you knew was giving her last $2 to live on for that week, you would just be thankful that she gave sacrificially? You wouldn't say, 'No, ma'am, take what you need so that you can live,' right? Wouldn't that be the ministry of the church?" And I'll just stop there. And David, you can pick up if you want to.
Yeah, I think that there are and is really that deeper teaching here. When Paul wanted to collect an offering for the needy in Jerusalem as he went about, he gave the instruction by which we should operate. And it is that each one, this is in 2 Corinthians 9:7, Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And certainly we should have a heart to give and be willing to give. I think Malachi 3 is excellent instruction on God saying, I'll bless you for giving. But there is the fact that it's the heart condition of willingness. And obviously she had a willingness to give this, but what was behind it, I think, was a compulsion that she, in a sense, had been beaten down to a condition that you just got to give, you got to keep giving, even to the last, to where your house is devoured. And that's what God will bless. And hopefully, and I'm sure God cared for her, but it almost puts a person in the position of having to tempt God. You said you take care of me, so I'm just going to give everything and see if you do it. And we're not to do that. We're not to put God to the test that way, although that kind of wording is used in Malachi 3, but it's God saying, see what I will do. Start giving as I've instructed you to give. And MacArthur, in his commentary, quotes the Baker exegetical commentary on the New Testament, just to kind of give a picture of the attitude of the scribes towards widows. It says the scribes consumed the limited resources of those who had the least. They abused their hospitality, defrauded them of their estates, mismanaged their property, and took their houses as pledges for debts that they could never repay. It was a ruthless thing in which they ended up much like some charlatans of today, just working on people's emotions and such that they benefited, and others, out of trusting their fallacious teachings, gave to their own hurt. And I think that's what's going on here. And when Jesus says that all she had to live on, that's saying her house now was devoured.
Lucas, any thoughts you want to add to? You're muted, Lucas. Sorry, you're muted, Lucas.
Certainly, it says all she had to live on, which is remarkable. I knew and had a good friend, passed away now, who gave out of her social security income, which is all the income she had. I think she did have other assets like house paid free and clear, that sort of thing. But she only had social security income. So she actually sent money for my seminary more than once to pay for tuition. And, I was not, I didn't call her up and hit her up for it. She called me. It was like, I want to give to your seminary. And so there was a certain sort of remarkable giving spirit that she had. Is it that she gave out of all that she had to live on? Well, certainly, hardly. Is this woman giving every single dime to the temple whenever she gets a dime, she just runs to the temple and drops it in the coffers? Probably not. But the idea here is, at the very least, that this is money that she very reasonably could have said, I'm not going to give it to the church because I need it for myself, right? And that's even rational. That's reasonable. But she gave, like I said before, clearly out of a sense of faith. Like I want to give to God. It's almost like it's an act of worship. That's one of the things we say in our church. When you give, we don't want to not discourage you from giving. Giving to God is an act of worship. It's a recognition He's given all to you, right? You're not out of compulsion, but out of a grateful heart. And so this says in 2 Corinthians. So So that's what's remarkable about what she's doing. She's certainly wouldn't be giving at all if it weren't out of a grateful heart, because certain things you can deduce by what's going on with her, and that it's therefore beautiful, wonderful. It's a sweet aroma to God. He receives it as a love offering that it is. God doesn't need her 2 mites because he has all the money. He owns cattle on 1,000 hills. Like, he doesn't need her money, but it's an act of worship that is profound. So I think that's really the substance of what's going on here.
I would just make this comment when you talked about the woman giving out of her Social Security, just calling you up and giving. Certainly those actions portrayed that she had decided in her heart. This is 2 Corinthians 9:7, and wasn't doing it reluctantly. She initiated the contact with you to do it, nor was it under compulsion. You had not, she may have got, I don't know, a letter that went to others and said, if you'd like to help, this is what I'm doing. Who knows? But she would not have been under a false compulsion, is what is here being asserted, and probably was a cheerful giver. She probably met all those qualifications of 2 Corinthians 9:7. I think here, we don't know. We don't know what her attitude was and so forth, but the context. And if we take the Mark and sandwich approach, Jesus has a piece of bread that says devour widow houses, and he has an act of a poor widow in the middle of this eating, and he has said it was all she had. Her house got devoured. I just think we have, I'll just put it this way, we have definitely another teaching that needs to be addressed. And I think it speaks to much of the way in which modern American Christianity operates in teasing and compelling and putting people under guilt trips. You've got to help the ministry, and putting people under false pretense of, in which if they would just give till it hurts, then
like Paula White.
Like what?
If you like Paula White, you want to be blessed, you give to the church.
That was a good
If you're
example.
not
Paula
blessed,
White.
it's because you haven't given to the church. Like, she's a
Right.
prosperity gospel shill.
Right. There was
I
that
hate
one,
that she's the head of our religion in America.
right. There was that one sermon, I don't know what she said, something like, I'm not going to give a blessing upon the audience until you give this much money, or something like that. And it's like, oh my goodness.
Well,
Anyway,
it's worse than that, David. There's the pastor who decided the people hadn't given enough in the first offering and ordered a second offering and told the ushers to lock the doors so people couldn't leave the sanctuary while they did the second offering. Like,
okay, that's a mass kidnapping right there.
I think we've gone beyond cheerful giving at this point. But no, I really, and Lucas, you're the brains of the group. I don't know, but I see this as the object lesson to the teaching that precedes it. It's the object lesson of this is what's become of the hypocrisy that prevails. And, Jesus names the scribes and the Pharisees and such, but he always calls them hypocrites when you read it in Matthew. And it's really hypocrisy that Jesus doesn't abide. And he's pointed out the hypocrisy. And now here's the object lesson. It takes me back to my childhood when my grandfather taught the lesson that, you need to get out and do what you're supposed to do. You can't just make the excuse that, I'll do it when I get around to it. And he had taken the time to make all these little keychains out of wood that were round, and he wrote TUIT on each one. And he said, now you have a round to it, so you can do these things. And that was his object lesson for that lesson that he was teaching. And I think that's what's happening here. Jesus, particularly with the disciples, I think he's teaching the object lesson because he's still training his disciples to be prepared for their work in establishing the church and what the church one of the things that the church is to be focused on is caring for the widow and the orphan. And I don't think that's the only two specific classes of people they care for. I think that's a descriptor of the type of people that the church is supposed to care for, those that are in a position of inability to truly care for themselves. And he's showing it's not happening here with these hypocrites. Don't be like them. Do better. All right. I've said my piece. Anyway, so that's Mark chapter 12, and that's the day of Tuesday. I think that's the evening of Tuesday. Now, one thing that comes up in this chapter, just as a review of the whole chapter, here in verse 35, where Jesus taught in the temple, he said, "How can the scribes say that the Christ, the Messiah, is the son of David?" And I think this is the first time, because obviously Jesus knows he's the Messiah, right? So he's talking about himself. I think this is the first time, maybe, that title, Son of David, has been given to Jesus in this gospel. I don't remember us reading that before. I could be wrong.
Say it?
No,
I'm sorry?
there was a poor man.
When he came in on
Blind man.
the donkey, didn't he?
Oh,
say
that's
so?
right. That's right.
Chapter 9 or 10. There's a blind man said, "You're the son of David."
Right.
Blind Bartimaeus.
This is is it chapter 10?
10:47.
Yes, Jesus, son of David. Yes. Right. So that was blind Bartimaeus who was giving him that title here. I don't know that we can say Jesus is, well, I mean, Jesus is asserting that title belongs to the Messiah, and of course he knows he's the Messiah. So Jesus is appropriating that title to himself as well. All right, you're right. That blind Bartimaeus had said that before. I was just thinking that was a title that we hadn't seen before, but we've not seen it as much. I mean, throughout this chapter, the title most often used or given is teacher or master, and that's by the Pharisees and Sadducees and scribes, referring to Jesus as teacher and master, which might be a little disingenuous, right, on their part.
Blind Bartimaeus in chapter 10 says, "Son of David." Then there's the triumphal entry, which reminds you of David bringing the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. It's like a parallel, right? Like the presence of God is moving into the temple, right? And then maybe this is like a capstone of that same, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now we're in the temple, right? Where the triumphal entry is a move towards the temple. Jesus goes straight to the temple, has all these discussions, and then this is sort of right here at the end of chapter 12 that comes up again, that this is
I guess what strikes me about it,
authority.
Right. What strikes me about it is that these letters are in red. Anyway, I mean, it's Jesus kind of asserting these titles to himself: the title of Christ, the title of Son of David, and the title of Lord. Right. So he's not saying I am the Son of David, but he is the Messiah, right? So he's clearly recognizes these titles as being appropriate to apply to him. I guess that's what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, he's appropriating them to who the Messiah is. He's also obviously setting up his audience to learn a lesson here that they in particular needed to learn, that came out of Psalm 110. And so they had to agree, and we pointed out that in Matthew, he actually asked them first, who do the scriptures say the Messiah is? And they said the Son of David. And then that's how he got them into this setup, in which he quoted from Psalm 110:1, in which David, in the Holy Spirit, inspired scripture here, declared this. And they knew that they tell that this was spoken of the Messiah. And Jesus said, look what, let's tie this together. He's talking to his son, yet exalting him, his son above himself.
So Lucas, in the Jewish mindset, when they think about the Messiah, do they think God incarnate when they think Messiah in the Jewish mindset of this day? You're muted. Sorry, Lou, you're muted again. So
I'm trying to conserve bandwidth. So I was thinking about what David said there, that the Peter back in chapter 8 confessed, "You are the Christ," right? So is that a confession of him as the Messiah? Yes. The identity, Peter doesn't say quite yet that you are the son of David or the son of God, but I think it's pretty well understood that probably Peter understands that because of what Christ teaches here. Certainly after Christ teaches it in chapter 10, and 10 and then 12, makes that connection for them, especially in chapter 12 here, making that connection between the son of David and why does he call him Lord? Because David recognized that there was a son who would come after David that would be greater than David, right? And you can only be that if you were before David. Like, children are never inferiors to their fathers, right? In verse 37, David himself calls him Lord, so how can he be David's son? Jesus says things like, before Abraham was, I am, right? So Jesus is claiming ultimate divinity. Paul picks up on this and says that he's before all worlds, that he was before the foundation of the world. That in the beginning, nothing was made without him was made. So Jesus is teaching, hey, I'm more than just a man. If I'm the Christ, which Peter says, if I'm the son of David, which blind Bartimaeus says, if I am the Lord of David, as Psalm 110 says, then I have to be God, right? Like, you just have to follow the bouncing ball of logical progression here that Jesus is setting before you. It's like, you ever see those little kids where it hits each syllable, ba, ba, ba.
right.
Jesus is giving us the bouncing ball, if this is true, then this is true. If this is true, then this is true. And what's the conclusion that I need you to draw? That David's son cannot be his superior unless he is God incarnate.
Right. So those who are in the Jewish religion today, I presume, are still awaiting the promised Messiah. I don't claim to understand everything about it, but
Are they? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. But let's say that they are still waiting for the Messiah. Let's just say they are. I mean, is the Messiah they're looking for God incarnate, or it's not, is it? They've never looked for God incarnate as Messiah. They've looked for a prophet, right?
Well, Emmanuel, God with us, he tabernacled among us.
Yeah, that's all New Testament proclamation that they're not going to accept. Now, I think I heard Lucas say that when Peter made his confession, thou art the Christ, he didn't identify the Son of God, but Matthew says he did. I may have misheard what you said. Mark doesn't include that expression. Matthew says thou
art the Christ, Son of the living God, right?
Right. But
that's the way we always sing the song, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God.
Yeah, that's the Matthew. Matthew had the expanded quotation. Did Peter understand that as God in the flesh? I don't know. It was Jesus made known to Peter that it was by revelation from God that he had the knowledge to say that. It was probably one of the first inspired utterances of any of his disciples. But yeah, the Jewish mindset, I think even in the New Testament, what Jesus was up against in terms of making you a king and throwing off the Roman armies and the idea of setting up a literal kingdom. I think we're going to even get a taste of that in Mark 13 as the disciples are oohing and awing over the temple. Why are they all of a sudden doing that? And, you know, the context is they are more and more expecting that his kingdom is going to be manifest somehow. And hey, look what we might be, you know, actually taking control of, because the kingdom of God was centralized in the worship at the temple in their eyes. And so I think they had not seen the spiritual reality. They were still stuck in the physical concepts. Jews today, you know, there may be highly religious Jews that are sitting in expectation of the Messiah. I don't know where to go to read if they're thinking he's a physical man, which I think is what they only, I think that's what they do think. Or
Okay,
somehow
well, I
God-
asked AI. I asked AI. Here's what AI says.
Oh my goodness.
Do the Jews of today still await the Messiah? And if they do, what do they expect that Messiah to do? And AI says, yes, the vast majority of Jews today still await the Messiah, though what they expect him to do varies across different movements and traditions. In traditional Jewish thought, the Messiah is not divine, but a human leader and a direct descendant of King David. His primary mission is to initiate a world-transforming era. According to the great 12th century scholar Maimonides, a person is confirmed as the Messiah if he succeeds in a series of tasks. A king and teacher, he will be a pious king who studies and teaches the Torah and compels the people of Israel to follow it. A military and political liberator, he will fight Israel's enemies and free the Jewish people from foreign rule. Rebuilder of the temple, he will rebuild the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, which was destroyed in 70 AD. The ingathering of exiles, he will gather all the Jewish exiles from the diaspora and return them to the land of Israel.
It's Trump. It's Trump. He's the builder. He's the one.
Well, you might have hit on
Trump.
something that might be in the back of Trump's mind. I don't know, but
well, if it is Trump, it's going to be called the Trump Temple. I can tell you that.
One thing I have seen some videos recently of some street evangelists in Israel talking to the folks who would probably consider themselves like the very Orthodox Jew type, and they have expressed, from what I've heard in the videos I've listened to, very strong misgivings, especially when confronted with the identity of Jesus as the Messiah of Isaiah 53. Like that the Messiah didn't come, he hasn't come in 2,000 years. We don't know. You know, the temple was destroyed in AD 70. We don't know why the Messiah didn't come, and we don't know if he's going to come. And even if he does come, we don't know what he's going to do. And so I do think that that's true, that there's some very strong misgivings. They don't really seem to understand or have any sort of expectation of what that's going to look like. Yeah, maybe they think it's Netanyahu or something, but which actually would make you suspicious of some of those like leaders in Israel, like thinking that they're the guy, right?
yeah, a couple of things I would kind of push back on AI. I think you read at the first part, it said the vast majority of Jews think this, right?
The vast majority of Jews today still await the Messiah.
I say
So what they
that
expect him to do varies across different movements and traditions.
the vast majority maybe of conservative religious Jews, but the vast majority of Jews are not even religious. The majority of Jews tend more to be just cultural and irreligious, if not atheistic, which is something that people need to realize. And the religious Jews are divided into various camps, and some are quite liberal and others are conservative. I'm not an expert on it, but I've read from some good conservative theologians who teach on comparative religions and so forth. And when they teach on this, one of the things that students are often surprised to hear is that the majority of Jews are irreligious. Okay.
Right.
And so I would push back on that. And so then you get into a minority of Jews, might be still a large number, I suppose. And then you're dealing with a portion of that would maybe be adhering to wanting to look for a Messiah. I do think, I don't know if all that AI said was really out of Maimonides. I'd have to read on that, but it sure sounded like some of the dispensational views coming in there in terms of things.
Maimonides I don't know. But I would say that, just accepting AI for the moment, right? I mean, you as Christians, you may or may not have issues with some of the things that are said there, but certainly as Christians, we would be concerned about the rebuilding of the Holy Temple, right? I mean, why would we want this? Why would we want this? Why would we think this is a good thing?
Yeah, but a Jew would, if they are really going to follow the Torah and so forth, that's what they have to rely on for the forgiveness of sins. And I don't know what they think about the Messiah in terms of fulfilling the actual antitype of the type. I don't know that they think in that terms. For a religion that lost all of its means by which they could be reconciled and walk in forgiveness before God, it's really a sad situation. They have no means to deal with their sin, their guilt, and condemnation because they relied upon temple sacrifices, and they don't have it. And if that's what they're going to reinstitute, it's a hopeless endeavor. Lucas just smiles. I don't know if he has anything to add.
All right. Well, we've gone now. I've caused us to go longer than maybe we should have, but I don't know. I just these three verses in particular in Mark chapter 12 just to me stand out as here you have Jesus teaching the truth, and it's like the scribes and the Pharisees and such, they're just on a completely different plane regarding this, right? Because they're not even, I don't even think they're thinking in terms of God incarnate is with us, and that's who the Messiah was always meant to be, is God incarnate. And they're just like, so they're just constantly, I mean, Jesus is pitching them right down the pipe, and they're just constantly missing every time because they're just not on that plane with it.
Well, they're missing the miracle, the gospel, that the creator, and they're right in this, like God is not a man, right? God is not a creature. Like they say these things, I've heard them say it, and they're right. They have their theology right. God is one. Yeah, yes, absolutely. And we believe God is one as well, 3 in 1. And also we understand that God coming into nature and taking on flesh is a remarkable act of humility that is literally impossible. It's impossible for us to be made right with God. It's impossible for God to debase himself by becoming a man, but he does it. That's exactly what he does. He debases himself so that we can be glorified. That's the message of Philippians 2. He took the form of a man. He took the form of a servant. He was still God. He still had the right to be called God, but he was humble, and we need to be humble-minded like that. And every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. They may not want to, may want to resist the glorifying God for doing what he did, the impossible, but they should not. They should realize who Christ was and humble themselves.
And that's the point of our series here, is to gain a more complete understanding of who Christ is. And it just seems to me that that's, you read this historical account, but this gospel message of Mark, and there's this man, Jesus Christ, that everybody has to decide what they're going to do about him, right? You've got to make a decision about this man. And here in these 3 verses, he, in a rather direct way, reveals something very important about himself. And it deserves our attention, and it deserves our consideration as to who this Christ is. And if he is this, and he is, then that says much, just as you were saying, Lucas, that says much about our position before him, what that should be, and how we should be before him. So, all right, we better end there, because now we've gone even longer than we should have gone. So I appreciate those who have viewed the video to this point, and I hope it's been helpful to you and meaningful. And it's this kind of discussion and instruction that you can enjoy. Just go to the Bradford Christian College YouTube channel, click on the playlist, find the Sketchbook of Christ playlist, and you can find all the previous episodes. And we'd love for you to continue to stay with us, as next week, Lord willing, we will continue in chapter 13. And we'd love to hear your comments. And as I've said in previous episodes, I know that Pastor Lucas and Pastor David would love to talk with you if you want to know more about Christ and what it is that he can mean personally to you. And so don't hesitate to contact us with those questions and start a conversation. So thanks for being a part. We appreciate your following along with us, and please do the like and subscribe thing. It helps make the video more available, and please share it with those that you know would benefit from this discussion. And we look forward to seeing you again as we continue exploring the Sketchbook of Christ.